He arrived to fix a pump for the grieving widow, but when she offered him shelter for the night, a silent current sparked between them, hinting at a connection neither expected. The Ford F-250, a relic from the late 90s, bucked and shuddered beneath Elara as she navigated the serpentine gravel path of what had once been known as the Caldwell Estate. The late afternoon sun dipped low, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and deep violet, casting long, distorted shadows of ancient oak trees across the meticulously manicured lawns. Behind her, a golden dust cloud billowed, a transient memory of her passage, momentarily veiling the pristine hedges and the distant, shimmering expanse of the lake. Elara, a woman of 38, possessed a quiet dignity that had served her well through a life of unexpected turns. Yet the profound solitude of Willow Creek Manor, this sprawling, opulent home, had transformed from a cherished sanctuary into a suffocating chamber in the 11 months since Thomas, her anchor, her quiet strength, had been stolen by a cruel twist of fate. The grand, echoing rooms, once filled with shared laughter and the gentle murmur of their lives together, now swallowed every sound, every fleeting thought, leaving only a hollow, unyielding silence. Her current predicament, a sputtering water pump in the quaint guest cottage nestled near the estate's vast apple orchard, felt less like a chore and more like an insurmountable obstacle. Thomas, with his innate understanding of all things mechanical and his boundless, often naive optimism, had been the undisputed master of such domestic crises. Elara, despite her sharp, agile mind and a once thriving career in landscape architecture, found herself adrift in a sea of practical helplessness. She'd exhausted the local pool of handymen. Some quoted exorbitant, almost laughable prices. Others simply vanished after a single, fruitless visit. A few merely shrugged, declaring the ancient pump beyond salvation. Desperation, a quiet, gnawing beast, had finally led her to a small, unassuming advertisement tucked away in the back pages of the local weekly. A small square of text nestled between listings for rusty farm equipment and lost pets. Odd jobs, small repairs. Reliable, affordable. Call Orrin. Orrin. The name itself felt plucked from an older time, a simpler era. She'd almost dismissed it, a momentary flicker of doubt, but the chilling reality of a cold, silent tap in the guest cottage, a property she desperately needed to ready for rental, had forced her hand. She dialed the number, her fingers trembling slightly. A young voice, surprisingly deep yet hesitant, had answered. He'd agreed to come out that very afternoon, his quiet assurances about his experience with older systems a balm to her frayed nerves. As she pulled her truck to a stop near the cottage, a vehicle already occupied the space beside it. It was a faded blue pickup, older and more battered than her own Ford, its paint peeling in places, its tires thick with mud. It looked as though it had witnessed 100 harvests and endured twice as many harsh winters. Beside it, a young man was crouched, his back to her, deeply engrossed in the task at hand. A canvas toolkit lay splayed open on the damp grass at his feet, its contents a gleaming testament to practicality. He wore a simple, charcoal gray t-shirt, stretched taut across broad, capable shoulders, and well-worn jeans smudged with what looked like engine grease. His dark hair, thick and somewhat unruly, brushed the collar of his shirt. Elara stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath her sensible, worn leather boots, the sound surprisingly loud in the hushed afternoon air. "Orrin?" she called out, her voice a little too sharp, a little too loud. He straightened slowly, a careful, measured movement, as if mindful of an old, persistent ache, though he couldn't have been much older than his early to mid-20s. As he turned, his face was younger than she'd anticipated, perhaps 23, 24 at most. His eyes, a striking shade of hazel, met hers. There was a quiet intensity in their depths, a subtle wariness that seemed at odds with his youthful appearance. A smear of dark grease tracked across his strong jawline, and a few strands of his dark hair had escaped a hastily tied bun, falling across his forehead. He possessed a strong, classic nose, and his lips were full, pressed into a thin, serious line. "Mrs. Caldwell?" he asked, his voice low, a surprising warmth embedded within its quietness. He wiped his hands on a grimy rag, a futile gesture against the ingrained dirt. "Orrin Thorne." "My apologies, I arrived a little early. I thought I'd take a preliminary look before your arrival." No, that's perfectly fine," Elara said, a peculiar flutter igniting in her chest. It was the first time in countless months she'd felt any discernible reaction, however fleeting, to another person's presence. She walked closer, maintaining a respectful distance, a quiet acknowledgement of their professional boundary. "So, any immediate prognosis?" Orrin knelt back down, gesturing towards the external pump housing with a grease-stained finger. "It's completely seized up. The impeller looks to be thoroughly corroded, and the motor's burnt out. Not much life left in this old girl, I'm afraid." He looked up at her then, a faint, almost imperceptible frown etching his brow. "You'll undoubtedly require a new pump, Mrs. Caldwell, and a new motor. I can facilitate the ordering process, or you can, if you prefer. I have a reliable supplier who offers quite competitive rates." Elara sighed, running a hand through her short, practical blonde hair. "A new one?" "I had truly hoped for a simple repair. Thomas always maintained, well, never mind. How long would such a replacement entail? And what would be the estimated cost?" Orrin stood again, meticulously brushing bits of dried grass and dirt from his jeans. He was taller than she'd initially perceived, easily 6 feet. He crossed his arms, his gaze thoughtful and distant as he considered her questions. "For the parts, it would likely be a few days, perhaps up to a week, contingent upon current availability. The installation itself would take a few hours, once the components arrive. As for the financial aspect, I'd need to obtain precise quotes for the parts first, but my labor is a fixed daily rate, plus materials. I could provide you with a comprehensive breakdown." He retrieved a small, worn leather notebook and a short pencil from his back pocket. His hands, she noted, were calloused, strong, yet his movements were precise, almost delicate. He began to scribble, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. Elara watched him, a peculiar sense of calm beginning to settle over her. He wasn't attempting to inflate the cost, wasn't speaking over her, wasn't making her feel ignorant for her lack of mechanical knowledge. He was simply competent. "So, you're an independent contractor?" she inquired, attempting to fill the burgeoning silence. He looked up, a small, shy smile touching his lips, quick to vanish like a startled bird. "Something along those lines. I engage in a variety of tasks. Plumbing, electrical work, some basic carpentry. Essentially, whatever needs to be done, within reason." He extended the notebook towards her. "This is a rough estimate for the parts. In addition to my labor, I will not charge for the time I spend awaiting the arrival of the parts, only for the actual work completed." Elara took the notebook. The figures were surprisingly reasonable, more than reasonable, in fact, almost too low. "Are you entirely certain about these prices, Orrin? They seem extraordinarily fair?" He shrugged, a faint flush rising on his neck. "I endeavor to be. The people around here, they labor diligently for their earnings. There's no justification for exploiting them for a straightforward repair." He hesitated, then added, his voice barely audible, "It's also how I cultivate my reputation. Word of mouth, you understand?" She nodded, a faint, appreciative smile touching her lips. "I do indeed. So what course of action do you recommend? Should I procure the parts, or would you prefer to handle it?" "If you wish for me to, I certainly can. It would likely expedite the process, as I have established relationships with the suppliers. However, the decision is entirely yours, Mrs. Caldwell." "Elara," she corrected gently, the name feeling foreign, almost alien, on her tongue, after months of being addressed solely as Mrs. Caldwell by everyone who crossed her path. His eyes, those startling hazel eyes, met hers once more. This time, the subtle wariness in their depths seemed to soften, replaced by something akin to surprise, and then a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. "Elara," he repeated, his voice a low murmur, the sound of her name on his lips unexpectedly intimate, sending a shiver down her spine. He cleared his throat, looking away, down at his stained hands. "All right, Elara. I'll proceed with ordering those parts for you. I will contact you as soon as I have an estimated delivery date." "Thank you, Orrin," she said, and the gratitude was profound, heartfelt. "Is there anything else I need to attend to for now?" "Just ensure that the main water valve to the cottage is completely shut off," he advised, his voice reverting to its professional tone. "I've closed it off here, but it's always prudent to exercise additional caution." He began to meticulously pack his tools, his movements efficient, practiced. Elara lingered, an inexplicable reluctance holding her rooted to the spot. The air between them was shifting, subtly, imperceptibly. It wasn't a flirtation, not in the overt sense, but an undeniable current hummed beneath the surface of their polite exchange, an unspoken awareness, a nascent connection that was both disorienting and profoundly unsettling. It was the kind of feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time, and it was unnerving in its intensity. "Are you heading home, then?" she asked, striving for a casual tone, though her voice felt a little tight. He looked up again, his gaze lingering on her face for a beat too long before he glanced at the setting sun, a fiery orb sinking below the distant tree line. "Yes, I suppose so. I have quite a drive ahead of me. I'm currently staying out near Cedarwood Ridge, assisting my aunt and uncle with their farm." "Cedarwood Ridge? That's a considerable distance," Elara observed, a genuine surprise in her voice. "It was a good hour's drive, if not more, especially navigating the winding, unlit country roads." He merely shrugged, a subtle tightening around his eyes. "It's remarkably peaceful out there, a conducive environment for clearing one's head." He picked up his toolkit, the worn leather strap slung comfortably over his broad shoulder. "I'll be in touch, Elara." "Orrin," she said quickly, the word escaping her lips before her conscious mind could weigh the implications. He paused, looking at her, his hazel eyes once again filled with that quiet, unreadable intensity. "It's growing quite late, and you've driven all this way. Would you consider coming up to the main house? I could offer you a coffee, or perhaps a cold drink. It's truly the least I can do for your trouble and effort." His movements stilled completely. He looked at her, his hazel eyes unreadable in the deepening twilight. The offer, seemingly innocuous, felt loaded, a silent, unasked question hanging heavily in the crisp evening air. He hesitated, and for a fleeting moment, Elara anticipated a polite, firm refusal. A coffee would be "Most welcome, Elara," he finally said, his voice softer than before, a subtle tremor in its depths that hinted at something she couldn't quite decipher. "Thank you. You won't believe who took his side. This is just the start. It gets stronger." The imposing grandeur of Willow Creek Manor felt even more vast and desolate than usual, as Elara guided Orrin through the massive oak doors and into the cavernous foyer. The highly polished marble floors echoed with the faint cadence of their footsteps, and the soaring ceilings seemed to effortlessly absorb every stray sound, every whisper. Orrin, typically so composed and self-assured, seemed to visibly recede into himself, his broad shoulders drawing in slightly as his gaze swept across the intricate details of the grand staircase and the formidable antique furniture that populated the expansive space. "It's quite an impressive house," he murmured, his voice hushed, almost reverent, as his eyes took in the ornate carvings and the weighty presence of history. "It was Thomas's family home, passed down through generations," Elara explained, a familiar, poignant ache blossoming in her chest. "He adored it here, with every fiber of his being." I'm still attempting to acclimate to its vastness without him. She hadn't intended to reveal such raw vulnerability, not to a man she had only just met, but the words slipped out, unbidden, a testament to her profound grief. He simply nodded, his expression softening with a quiet understanding that surprised her. He didn't offer trite platitudes or empty condolences, for which she felt a profound, almost desperate gratitude. Instead, he simply stood there, a still, solid presence, allowing the heavy silence to settle between them, a silence that, for once, didn't feel oppressive or suffocating. "Come, I'll show you to the kitchen," she said, her voice a little brighter than she felt, leading him through a series of formal rooms, all impeccably maintained but devoid of any true warmth, existing almost as museum pieces. The kitchen, however, was a striking contrast. It was a generously proportioned farmhouse-style space, dominated by a massive weathered island at its center, and large windows that overlooked the sprawling, meticulously tended back gardens. It was here that she spent the majority of her waking hours, and it felt more lived in, more comfortable, radiating a subtle warmth that the other rooms lacked. "Please, have a seat at the island," she offered, gesturing towards the tall, sturdy wooden stools. "How do you prefer your coffee?" "Black, please," he replied, perching carefully on one of the stools. He didn't immediately relax, his gaze still surveying the room, meticulously taking in every detail. She noticed his eyes linger on a framed photograph placed on the counter near the coffee maker, a candid shot of her and Thomas, laughing freely, their arms entwined, captured during their honeymoon. A sharp, sudden pang went through her, an echo of a happiness that felt impossibly distant. Elara busied herself with the coffee machine, the comforting, rhythmic whir of its mechanism filling the quiet space. "So, Orrin, how did you find yourself in this particular line of work? You appear rather young for such an extensive skill set." She regretted the last part as soon as the words left her lips, fearing it sounded dismissive. He shifted slightly on the stool, his gaze still fixed on the photograph for a moment longer before meeting her eyes. "My grandfather, he was a general contractor, a master of his craft. He instilled in me everything I know. I began assisting him on various jobs when I was just a boy, during summer breaks, after school hours. He always imparted a simple wisdom: learn a trade, son, and you will never experience hunger. He passed away a couple of years ago. I've been endeavoring to perpetuate his legacy in my own humble fashion." His voice was quiet, infused with a subtle, palpable melancholy. "I am truly sorry for your loss," Elara said, her voice genuinely sympathetic as she turned to face him, a steaming mug of coffee held firmly in her hand. She placed it carefully in front of him, and he wrapped his large hands around the warmth of the ceramic, offering a small, grateful nod. "Thank you," he said simply. He took a slow, deliberate sip, his eyes closing for a fleeting moment, savoring the rich warmth. "This is exceptionally good coffee." "It's just a standard blend, nothing special," she demurred, taking a seat opposite him, making herself a cup of fragrant herbal tea. "So, you're currently residing with your aunt and uncle? Do you have any other family here in town?" He shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible sigh escaping him. "No, not really. My parents, they're predominantly transient. They work for a traveling fair, setting up rides, managing the games. It's an unconventional existence, I suppose. Not one that appeals to me, however. I find myself yearning for something a little more stable." His lips quirked into a fleeting, self-deprecating smile, quickly vanishing. "My aunt and uncle. They were in need of assistance on their farm after my cousin relocated for college. They offered me a room. I reasoned it was a suitable opportunity to regain my footing after a few unfortunate setbacks." He offered no further details, and Elara, sensing his quiet reluctance, didn't press. They settled into a comfortable, companionable silence for several minutes, the gentle clinking of their mugs against the polished countertop the only sound. Elara found herself studying him, observing the subtle lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, the persistent, almost habitual tension in his shoulders, even as he sat, the unconscious way his fingers, strong and capable, absently traced the delicate rim of his mug. He carried a weariness that seemed to transcend his youthful years, a quiet, enduring resilience that resonated deeply with her own unspoken grief, a silent understanding passing between them. "You mentioned you were a landscape architect?" Orrin asked, finally breaking the comfortable silence, his gaze fixed on a detailed design sketch pinned to a corkboard near the pantry. "I was," Elara corrected, a faint bitterness creeping into her tone, an unexpected surge of emotion. "Before Thomas, before the accident, I haven't truly been able to dedicate myself to work since. Too many haunting memories." She gestured vaguely around the expansive house. "This entire estate was a collaborative project for us. He purchased the property, and I meticulously designed the gardens, all the outdoor spaces. We harbored so many dreams, so many meticulously laid plans." Her voice trailed off, the crushing weight of unfulfilled dreams pressing down upon her like a physical burden. Orrin didn't look away from the intricate sketch, his eyes tracing the delicate lines and curves. "It's truly beautiful," he said softly, his voice imbued with genuine admiration. "The manner in which you've seamlessly incorporated the natural flow of the land, it's remarkably impressive." Elara felt a faint blush creep up her neck, a warmth spreading through her cheeks. It had been an impossibly long time since anyone had offered such sincere praise for her work, especially not in such a thoughtful, discerning manner. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little choked, battling back the unexpected wellspring of emotion. "It means a great deal to hear that, more than you know." He finally turned from the sketch, his hazel eyes meeting hers. There was a raw, unvarnished honesty in his gaze, a quiet empathy that bypassed all the usual social niceties and went straight to the heart of her profound pain. "It's difficult, isn't it?" he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated deeply within her. "To continue moving forward when a part of you feels as though it's simply vanished." Alara's breath hitched in her throat. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed to hear those very words, spoken by someone who seemed to understand, truly understand, the depth of her desolation. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she quickly looked away, blinking them back with fierce determination. "Yes," she managed, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the fragile composure she tried so desperately to maintain. "It is." The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer merely comfortable. It was charged, thick with unspoken emotions, with shared vulnerability, a fragile thread weaving between them. Orrin didn't reach for her, didn't offer a comforting hand, but his presence, still and attentively aware, was a comfort in itself, a silent anchor in her storm. He cleared his throat, a soft, almost inaudible sound, breaking the powerful spell, though the intense sincerity in his eyes remained. "Is that your motivation for attempting to rent out the cottage? To remain occupied?" Elara nodded, her gaze fixed on the intricate pattern of her teacup. "Partly. And partly, well, the estate is exorbitantly expensive to maintain. Thomas meticulously managed all the finances, and I'm still navigating the complexities of it all. Every little bit of income helps significantly." "I can certainly imagine," he said, taking another sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. "Operating a property of this magnitude, it's a full-time endeavor in itself." The conversation drifted, moving effortlessly from the mundane practicalities of the estate to the subtle shifts of the changing seasons, to the vibrant local farmers' market. Orrin spoke sparingly of himself, but his observations were remarkably sharp, his questions thoughtfully profound. He possessed a quiet, dry humor that occasionally surfaced, a subtle wit that made Elara chuckle, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in what felt like an eternity. As the evening deepened, casting long, encroaching shadows across the kitchen, Elara found herself strangely, unexpectedly reluctant for him to depart. The pervasive loneliness she typically felt as night approached was, for the first time in many months, held at bay by his quiet, grounding presence. It was a fragile, wholly unexpected respite, a momentary reprieve from the relentless ache in her soul. She glanced at the stately grandfather clock in the hallway. Almost 9 o'clock. "Orrin, it's growing quite late, and you have that extensive drive ahead of you." He nodded, carefully placing his empty mug on the counter with a quiet click. "Yes, I should likely embark on my journey. Thank you profoundly for the coffee, Elara, and for the conversation." He stood, and the air around them seemed to chill, the fragile warmth of their nascent connection threatening to dissipate with his imminent departure. "Wait," Elara said, the single word escaping her lips before her conscious mind could fully process its implication. He paused, looking at her, his hazel eyes once again filled with that quiet, unreadable intensity. You appear utterly exhausted, Orrin. And it's such an incredibly long drive back to Cedarwood Ridge. The guest cottage? It's entirely empty, of course. You could simply stay the night. Get an early start in the morning. I could even prepare breakfast for you." The audacious offer hung suspended in the air between them. Unexpected, startling. The guest cottage, a mere stone's throw across the manicured lawn, had been the initial point of their professional encounter, a place of business. Now it was being offered as a refuge, a temporary haven. Orrin's expression remained unreadable, his gaze holding hers. In that prolonged, silent exchange, a subtle flicker of something passed between them, a profound recognition of unspoken need, of unexpected vulnerability, a fragile thread weaving them together. What happens now, no one expected. But it's what restores fairness. The silence in the kitchen stretched, taut and vibrating with an unspoken electricity that hummed between them. Orrin's hazel eyes, those deep, knowing pools, searched hers with an unsettling intensity, and Elara felt utterly exposed. Her impulsive offer laid bare, fragile and raw. It wasn't a crude proposition, not in the carnal sense, but it was undeniably an invitation to a deeper, more intimate space, a gesture of unexpected care and a burgeoning connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. He could easily misinterpret it, or worse, perceive it as an act of pity, a condescending gesture. A faint, telltale blush crept up her cheeks, a tell-all sign of her own burgeoning unease. Finally he spoke, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, barely above a whisper, yet it filled the vast space. You would genuinely do that, Elara?" "Of course," she said, striving desperately to sound nonchalant, though her heart pounded a quick, erratic rhythm against her ribs, betraying her carefully constructed composure. "It's truly the least I can do. You've journeyed all this considerable distance, and you'll be undertaking significant repair work for me. It's simply practical, far safer than attempting to drive tired, especially on those dark country roads." He still hesitated, his gaze unwavering, a silent question lingering in his eyes. There was a quiet wariness in their depths once more, but beneath it, a fleeting flicker of something else, a profound sense of relief, perhaps, or a hesitant, almost fragile hope. I wouldn't want to impose upon your hospitality." "You wouldn't be imposing in the slightest," she insisted, her voice gaining a touch more firmness, a subtle assertiveness. "The cottage is prepared, clean, fresh linens await, and honestly, you'd be doing me a genuine favor. This house, it's far too grand, far too vast, to be alone in all the time. Sometimes, just the simple knowledge that there's another person nearby, it provides a profound sense of comfort. It helps, more than words can express." She hadn't meant to articulate that last raw sentiment aloud, but the words, once spoken, felt like a truth she'd been carrying, a crushing weight for far too long. A slow, almost imperceptible nod from him. "All right, Elara," he said, his voice softer now, a subtle tremor in it that she hadn't noticed before, a hint of something fragile, exposed. "If you are absolutely certain, that would be truly, exceptionally kind." A powerful wave of relief washed over Elara, so potent, so overwhelming, that it almost made her dizzy, lightheaded. "Good," she said, standing up from her stool, the simple movement feeling monumental. "I'll retrieve some fresh towels for you. There's a full, well-appointed bathroom in the cottage. Just make yourself entirely comfortable." She gestured towards the back door, which led directly to a covered walkway, a discreet passage connecting the main house to the guest cottage. "The lights are on a motion sensor, so you won't have any trouble navigating the path in the dark." As she gathered the plush towels from a linen cupboard in the hallway, a soft, almost imperceptible rustle of fabric, she could feel his gaze on her back, a silent, weighty presence. When she returned, he was still standing by the kitchen island, a still, almost watchful presence in the deepening shadows. She handed him the neatly folded towels. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting, accidental contact, and a jolt, faint but unmistakable, shot through her, a quick current of electricity. His skin was warm, slightly rough from the rigors of his work. He pulled his hand back almost immediately, as if scalded, and a faint flush rose on his neck again, deepening to a crimson shade. "Thank you," he mumbled, clutching the towels tightly, his gaze fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. "No problem at all," Elara replied, her voice a little breathless, the words catching in her throat. The air between them was now thick with a new, fragile tension, a silent, potent acknowledgement of the unspoken. I'll see myself out then," he said, turning towards the back door, his movements stiff, almost formal. "Yes," Elara said, walking with him, her footsteps echoing softly on the marble. She stopped just inside the doorway, her gaze fixed on him as he stepped out into the cool, embracing night air. The moon, almost full, hung like a luminous pearl in the ink-black sky, casting a silvery, ethereal glow over the meticulously manicured lawns. Orrin paused at the edge of the covered walkway, turning back to face her, his silhouette etched against the moonlight. "Elara," he began, his voice a hesitant murmur. Then he hesitated, as if searching for the precise words, the right inflection. "About breakfast. You truly don't have to go to any trouble." "I want to," she cut in, her voice firm, unwavering. 7:30. "Is that agreeable to you?" He nodded slowly, a small, almost shy smile finally appearing on his lips, lingering a little longer this time. It transformed his face, chasing away the weariness and the subtle wariness, revealing a quiet, understated charm she hadn't fully glimpsed before. 7:30 it is. Thank you, Elara. Truly, profoundly, thank you." He turned and walked towards the cottage, his silhouette a dark, receding shape against the luminous moonlight. Elara watched him go, a strange, potent mix of anticipation and trepidation swirling within her. The house, usually so vast and empty, felt profoundly different tonight. The oppressive silence that had been her constant companion had been replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible hum, a faint echo of Orrin's quiet presence, a comforting promise of shared space just across the moonlit lawn. She closed the door slowly, the soft click echoing in the profound quiet of the night. The framed photo of her and Thomas still sat on the kitchen counter, their smiling faces frozen in time, a poignant reminder of a happiness that was no more. She looked at it, then deliberately away, a complex mix of lingering grief and something entirely new, something indefinable, stirring in the deepest recesses of her heart. The past was still a heavy, inescapable shadow, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a sliver of fragile light, unexpected and perhaps even forbidden, had dared to pierce the profound darkness. She wasn't entirely sure what the dawn would bring, or what breakfast at 7:30 might truly mean for either of them. But for tonight, the suffocating, relentless loneliness that usually claimed her, binding her in its icy grip, had noticeably loosened its hold. And for a widow in a house far too large for one, that felt like a quiet, yet undeniably profound beginning.